Good evening. Just a few hours ago, US satellites detected something no country has ever dared to attempt before. When analysts reviewed the images and processed the heat signatures, and the first classified report reached the Pentagon, four major American cities were quietly placed on alert, not with fanfare or sirens, but through an emergency channel reserved exclusively for existential threats. Because what Russia just deployed, what it activated for the very first time in history, completely changes how the United States views its own national security. And I want you to grasp exactly why this matters. This was not a missile test, not a naval drill. It wasn't cyber warfare or espionage. What Russia did, for the first time in modern memory, thrust American officials into uncharted territory. Something so unprecedented, so outside the norm of typical state conduct that senior commanders described it with one chilling word: unthinkable. And yet, it actually happened. Tonight, I'm going to break down how the United States uncovered it, Russia's motives behind this move, what it means for global stability, and why key U.S. population centers from New York to Chicago to Los Angeles were quietly ordered to review rapid response plans for the first time in over 20 years. Stay tuned, because once you understand what Russia just unleashed, you'll see we've entered a new chapter in high-stakes, great power rivalry. It all started with a single anomaly, a power spike detected by a satellite designed to monitor nuclear activity. But this spike didn't match any known nuclear reactor or missile launch signature. It was smaller, more focused, and concentrated. Analysts initially assumed it was just a system glitch. These spikes aren't unusual, but the second detection came only 8 minutes later, with a third following 14 minutes after that. Three identical bursts from the same place with the same energy profile and timing. That's when the analysts realized this was no accident, because no Russian system had ever generated this energy pattern before. The coordinates traced back not to a missile base, naval dock, or radar station, but a closed Russian installation deep inside the Arctic Circle, a site so remote that even Russia's own satellite coverage there is sparse. When classified images arrived, something inside that facility's perimeter was glowing white-hot, much hotter than anything Russia has publicly acknowledged possessing. And as analysts enhanced the visuals further, they confirmed Russia had activated a system long rumored but dismissed by many as fantasy, a mobile long-range strategic platform with unmatched capabilities. Never before deployed by any nation, not in the Arctic, on land, or anywhere else. This wasn't a missile. It was something far worse. A system capable of striking the continental United States faster than current detection systems can reliably warn. That's why 4 U.S. cities were alerted. Because if Russia can activate this, and U.S. intelligence now believes it can, America faces a reality where its warning window shrinks from minutes to mere seconds. Let me break down why this matters. In every major military standoff, US, Russia, China, the concept of warning time is sacred. When a rival launches a strategic weapon, you need enough time to detect it, track it, confirm it, and notify. A missile system that can strike the continental United States quicker than any current detection system allows. Enough time for a guaranteed response. That's why 4 American cities were put on high alert. Because if Russia can launch this weapon, and now U.S. intelligence believes they can, the country faces a new reality where warning times shrink from minutes down to mere seconds. Here's what that really means. In every major military standoff, whether it's the U.S., Russia, or China, the concept of warning time is absolutely critical. When a rival fires a strategic weapon, you have to detect it, track it, verify it, and alert decision makers in time. Leadership must pinpoint the target and decide on the course of action. Even with hypersonic missiles or submarine-based weapons, there's still a small window of fleeting opportunity. This new system erases that tiny gap, and that's what makes this event a game changer. Russia didn't just trial new tech. Russia didn't merely deploy another weapon. Russia launched a capability the United States can't easily block, intercept, or deter. Something no country has ever possessed before, and it flips the script entirely. Now, let's dive into why Russia took this step, because in great power politics, nothing happens by chance. This wasn't some experiment or a fluke. It was a deliberate signal. For years, the U.S. has been expanding missile defense systems across Europe and Asia, platforms in Poland, Romania, radar installations in Norway, and joint defense setups in Japan and South Korea. From Russia's standpoint, that looks like being hemmed in, a tightening noose of American military presence squeezing Russia's borders. When great powers feel boxed in, they don't back down, they innovate. This new Russian system is the product of that pressure. It gives Moscow something new, a strategic equalizer, a way to get around U.S. defenses, a method to strike preemptively if the Kremlin believes, rightly or wrongly, that the United States might be plotting moves against it. Fear sparks innovation, fear escalates tensions, and fear leads rational powers to make irrational decisions. That's why this moment is so precarious. Moscow didn't unleash this system in calmer times. It did so amid peak tensions, sanctions, proxy battles, military buildups, and global rivalry. When countries feel vulnerable, they make gambles they wouldn't normally take. And when those gambles involve weapons never seen before, the planet edges closer to disaster. Inside the Pentagon, this revelation triggered deep analysis. Scientists, defense experts, and intelligence agents pored over heat trails, matched them with known data, ran simulations, checked trajectories. They concluded that if Russia fires this system, current U.S. early warning networks might fail to detect it quickly enough for any meaningful counterattack. In plain terms, America is more exposed today than it was yesterday, and that's a tough pill for U.S. officials to swallow. For decades, America relied on its superior detection satellites, radars, signal interception. It believed that even if Russia had cutting-edge missiles, the U.S. would have time to respond. This system shatters that assurance. But here's the twist. Most people miss the system Russia rolled out might not be built to directly strike the U.S. It could be something more cunning and dangerous, a bluff that isn't really a bluff. A weapon that's less about use and more about coercion, a strategic move designed to freeze Washington in hesitation. Because if Russia can bypass U.S. defenses, then every future crisis from the Arctic to the Middle East to Eastern Europe changes. The United States loses maneuverability. Russia gains bargaining power. The balance tips into uncertainty. Great powers don't need to fire to rewrite history, they just need others to believe they might. And right now, the U.S. believes. Now, let's shift gears to escalation. What happens after to change the course of events without firing a shot? Great powers don't need to pull the trigger to shift history. They just have to convince others they might. Right now, the United States fully believes that's the case. Let's move on to escalation. The moment after, the Pentagon confirmed the activation. The next big question was clear. Is Russia gearing up for a show of force, a missile launch, or a test in open waters? So, American analysts started tracking Russian activities in the Arctic live and in real time. Naval traffic ramped up. Air defense units sprang into action. Ground troops moved into fortified positions. Communications switched from routine to encrypted signals. These are classic signs that intelligence officers recognize immediately. Russia wasn't acting like a nation running a routine equipment test. Instead, Russia was acting like a country preparing to shift its strategic stance significantly. Then, the next red flag appeared, a strange burst of transmissions from Russia's Northern Fleet Command. The signals were brief, encrypted, and staggered, but they held a recognizable pattern, an exact communication sequence Russia uses when ramping up its nuclear alert status. This was the spark that triggered internal U.S. alerts. It quietly sent warnings to 4 major American cities. This pushed the United States to raise its readiness levels not because an attack was about to happen, since Russia isn't reckless, but because the risk of a mistake or misunderstanding reached a point where the US couldn't afford optimism. When top powers develop weapons that cut down reaction times, fear starts driving every decision. Fear of a surprise strike, fear of reading signals wrong, fear of losing the window to respond. Fear feeds the flames of escalation, and right now, it's running red hot. Let's break down what this means for the world. US officials get a crucial truth. Russia can't keep pace with America in economy, technology, or diplomacy. But Russia doesn't have to. It only has to do enough to make the US uncertain. That's exactly what this new system accomplishes. It hands Moscow a powerful equalizer. It forces NATO to rethink operations. It shifts how the US fleets even position themselves. It reshapes the way policymakers calculate risk. Picture the next potential crisis. NATO pushing closer to Russia's borders, or the US cementing ties in Asia. Before, America could act boldly, confident Russia's options were predictable. That's no longer the case. Now Washington has to ask, what if Russia flips this system on again? What if it threatens to use it as a show of strength? What if it moves the platform closer to the Arctic Circle? What if it combines this system with cyber assaults or disruptions in space? Every US move now happens under a shadow, one cast by fear. The most dangerous part? What happens from here? Inside the Kremlin, turning this system on wasn't just for show. It was a strategic move. And since great powers rarely back down once they reveal new capabilities, Moscow now has every reason to keep this system active, to posture, warn, and apply pressure. Over in Washington, policymakers understand ignoring this isn't an option. The US will respond. No major power sits still while vulnerable. But any US response, no matter how defensive, will look threatening to Moscow. And that's how the spiral of escalation kicks in. Russia activates a new system. The US beefs up early warning networks. Russia sees that as prepping for an attack. The US moves naval forces north. Russia pulls its fleet closer to strategic choke points. The US ramps up surveillance. Russia raises alert levels, step by careful step, inch by inch. The Kremlin activated this system. It wasn't merely symbolic. Russia acted with clear intent. And since global powers hardly ever back down after unveiling a new capability, Moscow now holds strong incentives to keep this system operational, using it to posture, to warn, and to apply pressure. Inside Washington, leaders understand this can't be ignored. The United States will react. No major power tolerates vulnerability without a response. Yet any countermeasure, even if defensive, will look like a threat to Moscow. That's how escalation spins out of control. Russia unveils a new weapon system. The US reinforces early warning networks. Russia sees this as prepping for an attack. The USA moves naval forces northward. Russia repositions its fleet closer to strategic choke points. The US boosts intelligence gathering. Russia raises combat readiness. Step by step, inch by inch, tensions rise. Its fleet edges nearer to strategic choke points. The US ramps up surveillance efforts. Russia boosts its alert status. Inch by inch, it's a tense escalation. Inch by inch, both sides edge closer to a clash neither truly wants, but both feel forced to prepare for. This is the harsh reality of great power politics. This same logic shaped the Cold War. This is the logic that nearly brought the world to the brink back in 1962. No nation, not even the United States, can escape this truth. And this is exactly the logic Russia has just reignited. Let me be crystal clear. Russia has done something no other country ever has. Not the United States, not China, not any emerging power. It activated a strategic system meant to wipe out warning time for the world's mightiest military. That's never happened before. That's beyond dangerous. It changes history itself. Tonight, the United States is shifting parts of its defense posture in response. Russia hasn't gained outright dominance, but it's secured something almost as powerful: leverage. Because now, the United States has to rethink recalculate, and start envisioning a world where old strategic assumptions no longer guarantee safety. The era of automatic American superiority is fading, and this moment, this activation, this alarm, this revelation is where that transformation begins. Whether the world tips toward restraint or further escalation depends on the choices made right now by leaders in Washington and Moscow, who must manage their fears without being driven by them. That's the heavy weight carried by great powers. That's the peril new weapons bring, and that's the stark reality the world awakens to today. Stay vigilant. This crisis is far from over, it's just moving into its next dangerous phase.